You're very welcome to the second panel of this year's Photography Ethics Symposium. And I really appreciate everybody taking the time to join us this afternoon or morning or wherever you are in the world. So thank you very much for being here with us today. My name is Savannah Dodd. I am from the Photography Ethics Center, and I'll be sort of the facilitator, moderator of the event today. So as I said, this is the second of 3 panels that we're running this autumn. And this event also took place last year. It was our first Photography Ethics Symposium last year, and that was on the theme of working with people. And that was held at RPS House in Bristol. But this year, due to obvious circumstances, we decided that it was better to move it online. And instead of having everybody like stuck to in front of their computer for a full day, we decided to break it into three events. So this year's panel events are supported by the International Women's Media Foundation's Howard G. Buffett Fund for Women Journalists. So thank you very much to the IWMF for making this happen. So the 3 panel events this autumn were, the first one was on October 1st, and we heard from Smita Sharma and Laura Saunders on gender, power, and documenting vulnerability. Today, we're going to hear from Melissa Bunni Elian and Martha Tadesse on representation, identity, and intersectional storytelling. And on December 3rd, we're going to hear from Jenny Ricketts and John Edwin Mason on objectivity, truth, and lies. In a minute, I will give you the link so that you can listen back to the recording of the first panel if you weren't able to attend that one. And I'll also share with you the registration link for our third panel, which again will be on December 3rd. So today we're really lucky to have 2 brilliant panelists. And I will introduce them both properly in just a minute. But just to get a little bit of the housekeeping out of the way, I thought it would be useful to give you a sense of what the format of the event today is. So we're going to start with a 10-minute introduction to each photographer's work. And then our panelists will have a bit of a conversation about representation, identity, and intersectional storytelling. And that conversation will be prompted from questions from me, but also from all of the attendees. So please do put your questions in the Q&A box. If you're not terribly familiar with Zoom, you should see a bar at the bottom of your screen with a Q&A. So if you want to just pop your questions in there at any time, and I will try to keep an eye on that and make sure that most, if not all, the questions get answered in the time that we have. So yes, and at the end of the session, I am also going to pop a survey link in the chat, and I'd be really grateful if everybody would fill that out. It's really important to try to get some sense of feedback from these online events. So without further ado, I will introduce Bunni. So Bunni is a multimedia journalist based in Yonkers, New York. Her work focuses on recentering people on the margins of society, culture from the African diaspora, and structural inequality. Bunni's work has been published in CNN, The New York Times, NBC News, Quartz, ESPN, NPR, BuzzFeed, and Glamour. She's also produced work for various organizations like Google, the Equal Justice Initiative, and UN Women. Beginning with video in 2010 at the Journal News, in 2013, she began freelancing as a photojournalist. And after years, she deepened her skills with training from the Bronx Documentary Center, and then she enrolled in Columbia Journalism School in May 2016. That same week, she was hired as a photo editor by NBC News. Oh, sorry, that's a little bit jumbled around, I just realized. My apologies. Right. But you've just graduated then from your degree at Columbia Journalism School, so well done for that. And you're also an alumni of the Missouri Photo Workshop, the Eddie Adams Workshop, and Bunni is the recipient of a Pulitzer Center grant for a research trip to South Africa for her long-form multimedia analysis on the global impact of Afropunk. So my apologies for my messed up reading there, but thank you very much for joining us, Bunni. It's really great to have you.
No worries, that's all good. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are on this wonderful planet of ours. Thank you to the Photo Ethics Center and the IWMF for having us present our work today and have this really important discussion. So, you know, intersectionality and representation, or I should say representation is a really big passion of mine. It's the reason why I do a lot of the stories I work on, my personal work, and really informs how I go about my duties as a journalist. So I'm going to share my screen soon, but I've been photographing for about 10 years and video and writing. And for me, it's always been about going deeper and being more thorough. Growing up, I was the only Black person everywhere I nearly went. So for me, how identity has informed my journalistic practice has really been through an exploration of myself, which I'm going to show you in a second, and using that as a very strong base to start my reporting. So I'm going to share my screen. And then, whoops. So it should be full screen now. I hope it is. And so, yes, so intersectionality and representation. First off, what is my identity? I'm Black, I'm Haitian American, I'm a child of immigrants, I'm a woman, I'm a New Yorker, I'm middle class, I'm a free spirit, a creative, I'm a human. So it's not like I have these words swirling in my mind all the time. This is just who I am, and just me designating myself to myself. What are my parameters? Which I couldn't go beyond and explore new things, or, you know, just being aware of myself is really important. And we'll talk about how later. So here is a really random photograph, but I wanted to I took this picture based off of a moment in my kitchen that I had with my mother. Here says, there are multiple layers to everything we see. Intersectional storytelling aims to bring each level to light. Our identity gives us access to seeing different layers. So in my house, we always have bananas. And when I was helping my mom put away food, I live with my parents, I was helping my mom put away food, and we had one, it looked like this. We had one ripe banana, and then we just gotten fresh bananas. So I'm putting it away, and I put it down the reverse of the bushel of bananas. I put it down the opposite way, but my mom told me to flip it so that they can get ripe faster. And I thought that was really interesting, and putting these two bananas side by side. In my house, the banana on the right is ready to eat. While some people, it might be a banana that you might want to throw away. This is actually for me when it's the sweetest. And then we have the unripe bananas. And just that little flip of the bushel, that little technique that my mom passed down to me, can be kind of, for me, it's like an analogy for like the unspoken knowledge that someone has when someone is from a community or shares a specific identity with the people they're photographing. So in this, I see 3 layers, whereas the banana on the right might be something that someone might throw away. It might be a moment that someone might not photograph because they don't know that this is like a peak moment if they're not familiar with a specific scenario in a culture, for example. And then just that little tip that my mom gave me, which I never heard before, because we need bananas for the next day. There's not enough for all of us that are right. So she said, flip it underneath, you know? So it's just like those little things that I feel like having an identity-informed journalistic practice gives people access to those nuances. And I just thought that was interesting little visual. So like I said, I've been the only Black person wherever I go, like all my life. It's not even something I think twice about, or I thought twice about. I had a really good upbringing, childhood. There are some instances of racism via naivete that I experienced when I was growing up, but that also helps me understand how people can carry that into their adulthood and just being unaware of some things. So this is me in college. And so, like I said earlier on, using photography to explore my identity. This is the root of it. Whether I was looking on TV or looking in magazines or even amongst my friend groups, I was always the only person who looked like me, or most often. As I got further on in school, I made different groups of friends, which is all great. But in college was also another time when I felt myself being pulled towards telling stories about people who are marginalized or overlooked. The thesis for my final project in college was about how the university is an institution for young adults to aim to go high in society, but it's also dependent on lower levels of skills that are absolutely vital to the functioning of that institution. So, for example, we have this, this is my college. Some next few images are from college, so don't judge me. So we have this this man who is mopping the floor on a day called Fountain Day. So everybody goes into the fountain and, you know, everybody's drinking. It's like a big party. And here he is just finished mopping the floor. And then, you know, kids are continuously going up and down the staircase, and, you know, just sitting with him for a moment, capturing, taking time. You know, there's a lot of partying going on, but for me, the part, like, really important part of this moment was like having that question of people who are necessary. Like, if this man wasn't mopping up the floor, the college would be up to open to lawsuits, right? If the students didn't get taken care of. So it's like, actually, these people who work in these positions are really vital to the functioning of the school. This is a food worker. Tens of thousands of people needing to be fed. It's like, so this was my perspective in school, and I carried that out into today. So this is more recent photograph. This gentleman, I just happened to be passing on the street, and he was in gorgeous light, and I asked him if I could take a photograph of him, and I talked to him for a few minutes. He loves blues. It was just after a concert, so I was just asking him his opinion on music. And so, you know, just humanizing people and bringing attention to this, to various group of people who are overlooked. This is me always after a different angle. That's our job as photojournalists, to make sure we're not just in our own viewpoint, but exploring different angles. And here, one of my earliest published works with the Daily News. This moment was really important to me because this is a whole protest around, this is 2014. Akai Gurley was murdered by police in his apartment building. And so for me, the height of that story, or that moment, this protest, was when his daughter was lifted up. You know, there's a whole bunch of moments in a protest that could be captured, whether like someone's open mouth yelling or like the mass of people in the street. But for me, this whole thing comes down to like the family aspect. This is the dad, this is his daughter, who's never, like, doesn't even know why she's being lifted up or the thing that she's holding. So it just brings me, the way I'm approaching these things is always from like that humanistic standpoint. The important thing to me here was the father lost, and this image signified that to me. I also get the opportunity, so in my pursuit of trying to photograph people who are on the margins of society, this gentleman was a recovering alcoholic and spent the majority of his life in prison. But this is an assignment for the New York Times, but when we went to go see him, the way he was holding himself up, the straightness of his back, and like the certainty of his demeanor, and just the way he dressed, it just showed a different person than who his history was. And so part of what I try to be in tune with is like, how do people see themselves, and how can I capture and honor that, like how they see themselves. So like I mentioned earlier before, like I would consider myself middle class. This individual's lower class, and it's just like, how do I make sure I'm checking? It's like a way for me to check my biases. Like, you know, I don't know if anybody ever heard that term, like poverty porn, where it's just like really focused in on the worst aspects in order to convey something. For me, I try and do the opposite, where it's just like showing people at their highest to show that they have worth besides what any other person might put on them. And then, yeah, so this is some clips from the story. So this is just right next to his kitchen, in his kitchen light, and just finding a way to like, he just had this like regal demeanor, and just trying to focus and photograph him in that light. Even though, you know, he's looking for the cheapest turkey, but you know, everybody does. So it's the cheapest, biggest turkey. So, you know, it's these kind of moments just to highlight who like a mix of like what I see and who they see themselves as. That's what I try to aim for. This was my first magazine article I photographed for. And these two just came in looking like models, but they used to be, you know, on the highest level of suspension. And so just the story was about like turning that corner, and like the skills that the principal brought to the staff to mitigate problems. So really loved portraying them in this light, even though they used to be troublemakers, quote unquote. Afropunk is something that's really near and dear to my heart. It's an alternative music festival that started in the States, but is now in several different countries. And this was another instance where I was exploring my identity. As a Haitian American, for a long time, I like didn't really consider my identity. I was just like, I'm Melissa, I'm Bunny. But Afropunk was one of those entities that really spoke to people who are like the only Black person where they are, and how they might have different interests than what's stereotypically associated with Black people. So in exploring Afropunk and exploring myself and how I identify, I go and photograph others and get their opinions on politics in the moment, exploring that as a social movement in itself. And it's really cool. I got to photograph the Afropunk Festival in 2018 for New York Times. And this is my favorite photo from that shoot. This man is wearing exaggerated, like a do-rag as a cape, which is like a piece of material that helps the hairstyles that Black people have like last longer when they sleep. And the reason why he had this as his outfit for Afropunk is because someone said to him that do-rags have a negative connotation. And so he was like, okay, I'm gonna make the longest do-rag I can and put like some bedazzled jewels on it. And, you know, this is who I am, and being very proud of that. And I got to, it's a bigger spread, I didn't have the other clips, but I got to bring that to the fashion pages of New York Times. And so that's really special to me, because him validating himself I can help amplify that by photographing it and putting it as something that can be admired as a style, because that's how I look at it. Another person might look at it and say maybe that person's up to no good, but really they're just kind of keep their hair good. And so no matter who I'm photographing, what their identity is, I always just try and capture their spirit as I can understand it in those few moments with them. And like, for example, this is Madison Mcferrin. She's the daughter of a famous singer. And I didn't know anything about her father or her. And so as I'm researching, all I see is Madison Mcferrin, daughter of, that's everybody's context. So I actually stopped researching and just went in and with her as like another person, a musician, that she really, and I told her that and she appreciated it, because there is always this like cloud of like someone else. So that's like my identity as a woman, always being in that penchant for society to like attach women to the men that they're around. So that's me using my identity to inform how I approach this shoot. And I spent 8 hours with this person and it turned out really well. And this is another assignment for Wall Street Journal. And, it doesn't matter who I'm photographing, I'm trying to connect with them first. So we had a nice conversation for a few minutes before we started photographing. This is another instance of me exploring my identity. So I'm Haitian American. And so there was a ceremony, Agwe ceremony, the goddess of the water in Brooklyn. So I got to attend and just photographing these priestesses. So how my identity informs what my interests are. And this image I created, this was one of the few Black women in the crowd of this at least 500 troops about to be deployed. This is really early work, like 2012. And I remember I kept on looking at this, she kept on grabbing my attention. And one of the times that I looked at her, she was crying. And I thought that was a really powerful moment, signifying the sadness. She was the only one that came to tears like this. And even with animals, you can put, we always put our thoughts, as humans, we always put our own assumptions on others, on inanimate objects, on animals. We do this with humans too. So clearly these birds are in love and they make out sometimes. No, that's just what the tour guide was telling us. So it's just using these photos to illustrate like how we put our assumptions on animals. They could be exchanging food, Anyway, so I try to really, no matter what station people are in, I try and make sure that I capture them in the best light, because there's so many instances where we think that people are moved by seeing people at their worst, which I feel like is waning in effectiveness. So for me, like this woman, she's Iraqi. She survived 2 wars and is here with her very bubbly daughters. So I wanted to show that relationship as a means to show like they're just like us. We're all human together. Same thing here. It's the father making room, but like letting his children sleep. I think these are really important to see, so that when people say Black Lives Matter, they're not like, I wonder what a Black life looks like. It's just like, here are clear examples. Another father and his kid trying to entertain himself while his dad's on the phone. And representation, for me, this image is really important because not often, STEM is really important, but Black children are not often shown for their academic success. And here, just like seeing, again, like identifying as a woman and seeing these women like getting their groove on, you could tell they probably don't get to have fun a lot. This is at a wedding. And so just really tapping into like the feeling, you know, it's an assumption, but, you know, we can read each other pretty well, and, you know, just capturing that. And this young woman's like self-conscious about herself, and finding and like identifying with that in myself, and finding moments where that is evident. So you don't have to share an identity specifically with people to tap in to what they might be going through. And this is a Black male teacher. I never had a Black male teacher before, so this story was about that. How is rare in education. And we're winding down, but, you know, when I don't often photograph protests, but when I do, it's usually like the quieter moments. And, you know, from the perspective of an activist, what would be an important takeaway from this moment? It's like he was a huge circle, everybody's joining hands, and it's like joining hands, like what, like people coming together is like signifying that. So and so I think for me, I'm very comfortable in seeing differences, because it helps us. That's like the object of sight, is like being able to tell differences between things. That's how we, you know, between shapes and light. That's how we as humans digest information. And it's not necessarily wrong or right, it's just what we do. And it led me, like, this is one of my projects that I'm working on now, or have been for a few years, about the differences between the sides of town. And so I'm pursuing different ways of visualizing that, of capturing that. Tale of Two Cities is very common in popular perception, but it's like visualizing is like next level. And I just wanted to share this one. This is about 3 minutes, but this was, and I'll share this link to this longer video. I encourage you to watch it, where these two best friends talking about their difference in experiences around race.
And I had four crystals. And I looked at Priscilla and I said, dude, I fucking love my skin color. Now, this is a thought that I've only had maybe like 1 to 5 times in my life. I don't live in a world where that is reflected back at me very often. So it's something I had to work to convince myself of, right? Like, because my body is the color that it is, I don't walk through the world thinking that or feeling that way at all. So Priscilla also then had a very revelatory reaction to what I had just said. I was sitting there and I looked at Sid and I thought, I've never had that fun. And we intersect on our experiences of body insecurity, of hair, of a whole host of other things. But this is an experience she has not had, because the world tells her that not only is her skin color acceptable, but it is beautiful. It is a standard from which we see everyone else's skin color. That's right. So again, I've questioned many things. Never have I questioned whether or not I actually love the actual color of the biggest organ on my body. And so then Sid and I thought about the way that this conversation could get mishandled, because that's what we do all day long, every day. And I thought, oh my God, that's what would happen when someone who looks like me, who is afraid of their whiteness, would do. They would look at someone like Sid and say something along the lines of, yeah, you know what, girl, those white people, they really did us dirty. Those white people over there, as if this person isn't walking around in a white body with white skin and white experiences. Now, my package could come in a very nuanced immigration, many last names package, but it is nevertheless a white body. And I have learned that that's actually really hard for people to accept. I once taught a workshop about whiteness where literally we just put up the color wheel. Like picture like a Fenty makeup color wheel. And I just ask people to locate their actual skin color on that wheel. And it was the most grueling exercise I've ever put people through, right? It's like, I know I am there, but my experience, and I said, no, without a but, where are you on this Fenty makeup color wheel? And what I have learned running this platform is that people with my skin color experience will do everything they can to run away from whiteness. And sometimes it's actually in an attempt to get closer to Black people. We want to talk to you about why that's actually incredibly, incredibly detrimental.
So they go on to talk about, I'm going to share the link in the box when my chat is over. They go on to talk about how when people run away from who they are, they actually blindly perpetuate harms that come with their identity. So example for me, if I was blind to my middle classness, I could go into someone's home and insult them by being, unaware. And so last slide, for me, intersectional storytelling is about proximity. The closer you are, the more perspective, that saying, I think, Kappa, like if you're not close enough, it's not good enough. Well, this is an example of getting closer. Identity as a technology, as a technique. Our experience is something to use and inform, but also to check. If you don't know what your identity is, you can't check it. You can't check your bias in that way. Perspective is all about like where I stand, where my roots are, grounded in the soil. That's where I'm going to see from, and that's valuable. And looking deeply, seeing several layers at once is like one of my favorite things to do. Everything has more meaning than what is initially to be seen. And yeah, knowledge of our identity to keep our perspective in check. Because I know where my interests are, I can make sure that I'm checking and doing my due diligence to make sure that I'm verifying information and such. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I'm going to get that link so I can share it with you.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Bunni. That was a really, really, I feel like you fit a lot of really important concepts and like really important experiences into a short time. And I'm sure many people have like tons of questions. So just a reminder to everybody, you can always pop your questions either into the chat or using the Q&A function. And I definitely can imagine many people have a lot of follow-up questions for you. So thank you again, Bunni, that was brilliant. I'd like to introduce now Martha Tadesse. Martha is a freelance humanitarian photographer based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. She uses her passion and craft to tell stories of social justice and representative images of Ethiopia and the continent of Africa at large. Currently, she consults with a variety of local and international NGOs, in addition to building her personal portfolio by traveling to different parts of the world. Martha is a recipient of the East African Photography Award in 2019, which is organized by Uganda Press Photo. So thank you very much also, Martha, for joining us. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Hi everyone. Good morning. Bunni, that was excellent. I was like, what am I gonna say then? You've said almost everything. Amazing. Thank you, Savannah. Yeah, speaking about representation again, I'm very much interested in those maybe overly used representation and intersectionality. I think representation for me is bringing the untold stories to the audience and to the public, and also tackling stereotypical narratives of people and culture. This is very important to me as someone who comes from Ethiopia, who's been misrepresented in so many ways with both NGO, commercial photography, and more. So yes, with poverty porn, and so tackling those misrepresentation is my first goal as I document humanitarian photography. Trying to also unlearn, because I grew up with, I'm a self-taught photographer, so I didn't have enough resources to learn how to, document humanitarian stories, tell humanitarian stories, and people from different economical backgrounds. And so looking at, Bunny has already mentioned the different identities one can have. Maybe I can just only add the ethnic groups in our context. So there are different ethnic groups, different religious groups as for Ethiopia, and those are the key elements that, or those two are the major identities people identify with. And so in my work, I try to make sure that I am representing from every group as much as possible. I mean, Ethiopia is very big, but with what I have and with what I can, I always try to make sure that everyone is represented through my photography in a way that they are comfortable with. And so when I said stereotypical narratives or images, definitely poverty porn, we can go way back when it comes to Ethiopia with malnourished children being the posters all over the world for the We Are the World tour. And so even though we're in 2020, people still have those images and those long-held biases about Ethiopia. So I'm very much interested. I am from the capital city, I'm in Addis, but I have always been interested in the rural settings and how that has been portrayed in the media, even among ourselves, which is the urban community, how I personally understand the rural settings, how I understand what it means to live in the rural Ethiopia. So to just give you, I can speak about womanhood and masculinity and how they have been portrayed in our media. And looking at Ethiopian images, women are always, or most of the images that you see in the rural settings are either they're carrying a lot of children, either they're with their yellow jerrycan walking around the mountain, or doing housework. The same with men, they're always either drinking with their guns, having fun, So with that, I have been working on Suffrage Story since 2018 in November, following up a young couple that are based out in the northern part of Ethiopia in Gondar, and in a village called Maksayet. So to just give you a little bit of what I mean by challenging the narrative, even with ourselves as Ethiopians, I have pictures here. So looking at here, Marishat is a young man who lives in a rural village called Maksayet, and as you can see, he's roasting corn. That would be a snack for a coffee ceremony, very typical in that area. And this image tells a story that men also take part in the kitchen work in the rural, which is fascinating to me because you hardly find men taking the kitchen work or sharing responsibilities in the urban settings. So seeing Marishat helping or sharing responsibility at home is a way of tackling those toxic masculinity that we are spreading through our images. And again, as I said, with womanhood as well, you don't see men with their children with the images most of the time. So this portrait shows a young father just being a dad, and And yeah, this is another portrait of a couple, Marshad the Asmit the husband, and Bilda the wife, a couple enjoying local beer at on a weekend. Again, they both are farmers. They are from a rural village, no electricity, no access to water, but they are living their regular life just like every one of us. And they're not always on the road, as most of the pictures show, or always on the farm. They also have their own time to enjoy their life as a couple. So I love this portrait. It was a particular moment where he teases her, "Oh, you're drinking a lot." Yeah, and again, with joy and happiness, when we're talking about rural settings of Ethiopia, we're always focusing on child marriage, traditional practices, harmful practices, and I want us to also recognize that people also have everyday life just like every one of us. Again, I want to highlight there. So these are a couple, both tipsy. It was on their daughter's christening. And so yeah, the stereotypes that we see online, I try to tackle through these portraits and tell the other side of the story, or the balanced narrative of how everyday life looks like in the rural Ethiopia. This is their family get together before the christening party, and the couple are just intimate, enjoying their lives. Yeah. And the other, most of my work are with local and international NGOs. I work with humanitarian development projects. This particular image shows an image from Somali region in Gode. Women came together for a community conversation on FGM, and FGM pictures most of the time has to be, you know, a sad young woman from her back, or I don't know, there are different, we can just simply Google, but you hardly get images of women being taking a role in or being a change agent in their own community. So this particular image of Somali women getting together, chanting and dancing, advocating for anti-female genital mutilation, going around door to door, calling out other mothers to come for the community conversation, is a powerful image that I was honored to photograph. So through this, sorry. So these images are what representation means to me personally. It's about not denying the fact that there is lack of access to water, or be the necessities that are, or poverty, definitely. But what does it mean? What are the other identities? What does it look like for people living in the rural area, other than those dramatic phrases that we're used to? They're poor and happy, they're this and that, but what does their everyday life look like? And so recognizing and highlighting different identities in people is what intersectionality means for me and for my work. I think the most important question I ask, and how we should all ask when we photograph people and as we try to represent, is how do we perceive the culture? How do I perceive the people that I am going to document? So even though I am from the same country as the people that I photograph, I should also acknowledge my privilege coming from the capital city, traveling to the rural areas that completely has a different culture and different tradition. So I think recognizing those would mean having to represent people in a way that best represents who they are and how they live their lives. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you.
That's brilliant as well. Thank you so much, Martha. I'm really, really glad that we have you both here to talk with us. I feel like both those presentations really framed the topics so well, and it's really, really great to see some of your work. It's absolutely beautiful work that you both shared. So thank you very much for that. Again, just a reminder to all of our participants, please do stick any questions in that Q&A or in the chat. Otherwise, I will start us off.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Martha, that picture with the young couple and the kid, my heart is just like open. It's just like, I'm just thinking of like, imagine, I don't know why, there's more than one way to move people. Like, I don't have to see people at their most destitute to move. Like, if you said those people needed help, I would have been like, where I need to make sure they need to keep smiling, or something. You know what I'm saying? Those are beautiful images.
Thank you, dear.
Yeah, on that point, maybe I know that like in the podcast episode that we did together, Martha, you talked a lot about unlearning, and it makes me want to ask, I guess, in terms of like really focusing on people's everyday lives, is that something that you had to learn? Did you have to first unlearn reproducing the harmful tropes? And how did you do that? Or how do we all unlearn colonialist and racist ways of representing people around us?
Definitely. Thank you, Savannah. I think Bunny has slightly answered that question, actually, because it's, as she said, we didn't, like, these people come from a very lower class. They, like I said, access to water, access to electricity. There is a lack in those basic necessities, but I didn't have to document those to actually say, oh, these people are poor, you know? And so with unlearning, yes, definitely. I have said earlier that I didn't have resources, and all I had on my hand to learn was poverty porn. So see other photographers work, you know, oh, how does it look like? How do I document development projects, you know? So I did have documented stories in a way that I have taught that that's the right way or the only way. So I remember mentioning on the podcast, right? I had to delete some of my works from my website, from my online portfolios, because it's in the long run that you actually learn, oh shit, I have actually messed up big time. Um, it could be from not asking consent. It could be not getting their names. It could be not spending enough time, just getting the shot, the story that I need. Oh, boom, I'm done. So these things that you learn over time, and definitely I've made mistakes in the previous works that I have done, and then I think by spending more time with the people that I want to photograph is how I have learned so much and how I want to do things, you know? And so, yeah, unlearning is still a process. I haven't figured everything out. I don't think we won't. It's a journey, and we need to swallow our ego and say, oh, you've messed up big time, to ourselves.
Absolutely. Do you have anything that you'd want to add to that, Bunny?
Yeah, everything that Martha said, and I think it's, for me, one of my favorite things is going back and showing people the photos I took of them. I think one quick shorthand way to like not be colonial in our documentation of the world is taking photos that people will be proud to see of themselves. Now, I'm not talking about, you know, this, I think for this specific subject matter or topics, or, you know, if you're dealing with vulnerable people, you have to be gentle, I think. I think when we go in and try and get those like very raw shots, it's like, you know, you're capturing that hurt. If they see it again, they're going to go back to that place, which is not to say not to photograph those things. It's just like not to photograph only those things and not to only present those. If your lead photo is someone like in the middle of dying on the floor, I don't know if that works anymore. And if that moves people anymore. So that's why I was saying, like, when I saw the picture of the little family, it's like other people, someone else might have gone in and taken that picture, like a very wide lens and a very tight shot, and like, I don't know, something crawling on the baby or something. Be like, you know what picture I'm talking about. So it's just like, that's not the only thing that happens there. Look at this love here. Look at this love that's being interrupted by these lack of necessities. That's what that says to me. And I think leaning on love in our work, in our photographs, might steer away from like just looking at someone as like an object to be devoured.
Absolutely. And you sort of touched on this previously, Bunny, but you had said that something along the lines, I'm trying to read my notes, they're very scribbled, but something along the lines of how you don't have to necessarily share an identity with someone to tap into what they're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if maybe you could expand on that, because I think that a question that comes up a lot and that I hear a lot of people wrestling with, especially right now, is, you know, do you have to be from a particular community to photograph that community? And well, yeah, what do you think about that? Either.
I think that, I don't want to say who can and can't do what. I just want people to be aware of their abilities and their limitations. I think it's a lot easier to take a good photo than take a meaningful photo. And so then we get caught up in like, and it happens to me too, is this like, I need to get this like award-winning shot. And the way one moves when that happens is like out of angst and a little cold. So I wrote here in my little handy dandy notebook about this. So as like the class consciousness part. So it's like tapping into the burdens that I know to empathize with others. But I have to know that I'm still going to come up short in my understanding because that is not my experience. And so I had to do my best to check myself and welcome the checking of others. So I've been told, you know, hey, don't do that, or I don't like this, or you're assuming. I've been told those, and I'll be like, okay, I can see that. And then I try not to. I work really close with people that I'm photographing. I try and get in their world, so I try not to come in like as if I know more, you know, like they're the experts on them. So yeah, so I think that's how, it's like just knowing that I'm not going to fully understand, but that I have some things that I can relate it to at least start.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Martha, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Just to, yeah, as long as we acknowledge our privilege, right? As long as we acknowledge our privilege, respect the culture, and allow the people to tell their own story the way they want it. Just making sure that we have read something before we actually travel to document, we know at least a little bit about the area, the location, be it political, economical issues, then asking, I think, other than assuming this is because these are the people with this, again, our biases. Yeah.
Yeah, and on that point of culture, we have a question here from Robert who asks, well, he says, when we view images, we view with our personal backgrounds. And when a photographer takes an image within their own culture, it puts their culture in the image. How do we communicate the differences between the different cultures? So I think that might be in relation to like reading photographs in different contexts, maybe, and different from the context in which they were produced. Do you have any response to that?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, how do we communicate? Are you saying that the image maker communicates the differences?
My understanding.
Yeah, so I had one mentor, we were looking through photos, and there are some people in the Congo, I think, wearing like really fancy suits. And beautiful images, it was like a whole book. And my mentor said, look, they're in this condition and they're spending so much money on the suits. I was like, yeah, but if you really look at it, for me, it was like, look at the condition they're in. And it's like the suits are like, I don't care where I am, this is how I'm presenting myself. So for me, it was like a statement of power. And for my mentor, it was a waste of resources. So I think that is the difference. And not to say his is not true. Maybe it is a waste, but you'll be surprised how people go about gaining or reclaiming strength. So I try not to judge people on those things. That's another thing, like, humbling my perception of like what's worth doing, Yeah, so I think that is an example of how images can be read differently.
I think that's a great example. Absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense, and my understanding of the question definitely answers it. Martha, do you want to respond to that question, or do you want me to throw you another one?
No, I can. Yeah, I think she has said, Bunny has answered it. I don't think I have anything else.
Okay,
thanks, Robert.
A question here from Allison Baskerville is, what is the role of documenting whiteness now? How can we use photography to examine all forms of white supremacy and examine not just the male gaze, but the gaze associated to privileges of whiteness and class, given that this is the history of the invention of photography, and how can we further decolonialize the gaze? You look very eager to share with us here, Bunny. Do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, I'm so excited for that question, because I think right now we really do need that examination. There's some things I can't go in and photograph. I could be, unsafe, and I could also miss clues, context. And we do, like, how do you visualize privilege? That's a challenge, and especially in the terms of like where we used to have colorblind being like a virtue, now we're having it acknowledging the colors as the new virtue. So that includes white people. Like, white people have to examine themselves. I don't have the book with me, but there's a book called The History of White People, and it goes through the history of who was considered white at different times and why those shifts came. It was always like to maintain white power in all structures. So much so that a union can shoot itself in the foot because there's a group of Black people that want something, and now it's going to have benefits for Black people. People in the union don't want that thing anymore. That's an example. I could bring up that link to that TED Talk a woman was giving about how racism negatively impacts white people too. So I was just like, wow, that's really interesting. Like, we probably could have flying cars by now if it was like, I don't know, if we were just allowing people to thrive. And that doesn't just include people of color. It's just like a lot of lower income, marginalized people in the white people too. So, and now because of these structures, now it's affecting the middle class, and now it's a problem suddenly. But these things have been going on to somebody in society at all times. It's just now it's very clear. So yes, I can't wait for these more these projects to examine this.
Martha, would you like to respond to that question, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can speak about savior here, because in my context, right, all the images that have been made, poverty porn slightly goes with white savior mentality. So I think it's about acknowledgement. The issue that I see, I cannot stand poverty porn. Let me just put it that way. So whenever I see on Instagram, if I'm having a good day, I try to engage, hey, this picture, I remember one specific picture taken in Uganda, one of the orphanage centers. And it was a young girl, probably 15, 16. She's carrying a baby she's carrying a baby standing right in front of a door, and it says this is the caption done by a white photographer. It says, orphaned mother, orphaned child. That's what it said. And of course, with the hashtag goes Africa. So I'm just sitting here thinking, who is this girl? What's her name? Where is it? Where's the location? What are you trying to tell us? Orphaned, I mean, yeah, she might have lost her, either she's double or single orphaned, but that's not her story. That's not just the story that you could tell to your audience, especially international audience that is learning or trying to understand about the other world, right? So I tried to reach out. The first thing was a defense. So I think the first important thing that I would like to say is acknowledging when local photographers or the people that you are misrepresenting tell you that this image is problematic for this reason. Don't get defensive. If you want to decolonize, if you want to change, if you want to do better, is by listening the locals telling you this is wrong. So yeah, I want to point that and acknowledging those terms, just use them. Poverty porn, white savior mentality, acknowledge it, use it, and then that's how we can learn. Thank you.
So we have a question here from Nancy Ford. asking if potential collaboration is one way to seek to decolonize the gaze of white privileged photographers, how might you recommend in terms of how to approach or invite collaboration, wanting to be conscious of not burdening the individual or community with expectations of allowing or participating in collaboration to assuage white guilt? Humility seems a vital component and a way to begin. Who would like to start with that?
I think when we use the word collaboration, I think it sounds a lot more active than what it actually looks like in process. For me, collaboration means inviting the people who are going to be visualized into some aspects of the decision-making process, of the reporting process. So it could look like, what is important to you about this thing, whatever the topic is. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but it's like deferring to them for some aspects of the storytelling process. Whether it could be connecting you with other people. Like I'm doing something with farmers, and there's a big farmer community that I interviewed one couple, and I hope that they introduce me to more. So it's that, for me, is collaboration, rather than going in and, you know, they're going to be the experts on, they're going to guide me. My process is to like gather and verify and contextualize, but I think it's treating people like experts, in addition to the, you know, your professional skills as a journalist. That's the collaboration for me. So I know a lot of it feels like you're forfeiting some type of power, and you are. That's the work of decolonizing, of like unlearning, and you have to feel free to that unknown that you just released out into like giving this power to someone else. Be certain in yourself that you are able to work with whatever comes your way from it. And that's going to leave us open to like more truth rather than, or than our confirmation of our perception. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I think, very well put and a really important point. Thank you so much for that response. Bunny, do you have anything to add to that, Martha, or do you want me to jump on to the next question?
No, I think she has answered everything. Thank you, Bunny.
Peter Fitzpatrick has asked a question here. Do you have any strategies of sharing the results with your work back to the community you've collaborated with?
Strategies for sharing?
For sharing the work back to the community.
It could even be as simple as emailing an outtake. Even better if you're going to see them again. Everybody loves a print, and it's really fun to hold a photo. It's like fun to hold yourself. So I had one person that was like baked into the workshop, is to give it prints. This one that was at the Bronx Documentary Center, and I gave the person the picture. It's a flower, a florist. And he said he looked at it. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I love it. I don't like pictures." He always has his pictures taken with sunglasses on. So me photographing him was like one of the first times he's been comfortable around the camera. And when he told me that he really liked it, that was like, so like, then he let me photograph anything. So if you want access, let people have a really nice photograph of themselves created by you. And then they're gonna see what you see how you see them, and they're gonna love it. This is another thing about like going back to like be happy to share pictures that you took of them, and creating those kind of works. Because I'll tell you, I went to another workshop, and there was someone who, they were photographing So I think one of the only Black families in the project, or Black people who were like found, it was like in the middle of Missouri. And this person just happened to have gotten arrested, and the photographer was there to photograph it. And so that image was, you know, we go back and we share photos with the community and we lay it out so people just like walk up and down and see what the photographers got for the week. And it's really nice, you know. And this person, one of the few Black people, I think probably the only Black person whose photographs had a picture of him being arrested. He looked at me and he's like, "You see how they did me?" And I was so hurt. And it's just like, was that necessarily a picture that should, like, given, like, yes, it happened, it's going to be in her portfolio, but like, given what that event was, you know, and it was taken off as soon as he saw it. And it's just like, you have to think about, I forgot what the question was, but it's just like thinking beyond that moment of like, I got this action shot, and thinking beyond it and like how that person's going to feel knowing now that like half of the community saw him get arrested. You know, like, what did that add? On top of the fact that it was in Missouri, and now we're finding out that Black people are harassed by the police. So it was probably, it could have been an instance of that. It's a very small community. They let him go. You know, I don't have the details of it, but it's just like, now we know more. That will be an informed experience that that photographer will take. And now, like, all these things happening, they'll have more context. Like, is that, like, what was this a picture of actually? You know, just gives you more questions to ask.
Absolutely. I want to come back to a couple of points that you brought up there, but I want to ask Martha first, if you have any other strategies of sharing results of your work back with the community before we move on. I want to make sure, in case you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Savannah. Actually, let me just share my most favorite exhibitions I have ever done. This is like from previously, I just showed you about the fresh story, and I'm still following the story. And so for her first birthday, I had a photo exhibition in the community in their compound. And I had few prints for the community to see, and it was very touching to see how the community took that exhibition. They were happy to see their own pictures printed, their daughters, their relatives, then their neighbors were there to see their pictures. And I highly recommend, whenever we have the possibility of traveling back to the community, or if there's any chance of traveling back, to kind of have a mini exhibition for the community to see what you've done and what you've been working on with their stories. The other strategy I would say is Give Photos is one of the projects I did in communities, to share Polaroid with communities. Most of the people probably this is their first time to see their own pictures. So these are some images that I just leave them with the Polaroid. And you hear people, "Oh, can I print them in big for my house?" You know? And so, yeah, having a mini Polaroid cameras that you could just leave out when you're traveling. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, those are great examples for sure. I just wanted to jump back to a point that Bunny made before we move on, about, because I think that you've both made this point actually several times. I think it's a really interesting thing because we talk a lot about, you know, how things are represented, but I think that there's a really important point that's coming out about, well, what do we need to see? It's not always about representing, I think, yeah, you know, maybe everything, but focusing on what needs seen. I don't know if that makes sense or if that resonates or if you can speak to that at all.
For me, what comes up immediately as you mention that is if you look at the movies that are coming out now that are like centering Black stories, no matter the genre, there's always a moment where you can tell where the director is just letting you enjoy the visual of people just living. And so whether, and you can always, for me, I can always tell where it's like 30 seconds of just like if we're transported to like 1900s Tulsa, like we were for Lovecraft Country, no, Lovecraft County. There's just some moments where it's just like they're talking about the prom, or you see the scenes on the streets. I could recognize it in Malcolm X, the movie by Spike Lee, where they're just following a little boy delivering groceries. And so in those scenes, it's scene setting, but it's just like, Spike Lee does that a lot, actually. He'll just like stop a film and like just have pictures of New York City, like he did for She's Gotta Have It. So there's always these moments of pause where we're just getting to witness people just being. And I think we don't have that enough. And for me, we don't see people just as they are. So just like those portraits, some people might think that's a little boring, but it's just like portraits, you know, the first thing when you don't know someone is you look at them. That's how you get to know people. So it's like portraits, like getting to know someone.
Absolutely. We have a question here as well for Martha. Susie asks, besides capturing the names, stories, and everyday lives of those classified as, quote, living in poverty, to flip the long-held and harmful images that have been created by NGOs and white saviorism, what more can be done? What role can photographers have in educating audiences and eradicating implicit biases?
I could say the most important thing is how we caption our images that play, like earlier, orphaned mother, orphaned child type of captions, you know. So we need to make sure that we're not using those dramatic phrases that are meant, quote unquote, to define Africa, right? So this narratives of, oh, I walked a long way under the African sun to meet this family, this, like, no. Just tell the story and make sure that you're not perpetrating the same thing that's been done. It's about how you edit your image, how you're using the angles, which pictures you are deciding to post for a certain story, and how when we share our personal experiences being there, that is very important. Yes, it might be a difficult road, definitely, and that's not new. That's not new in the sense of you might find a difficult road in the urban setting as well, but you never see those narratives or those phrases being used in the urban setting image. So I think it's important to kind of examine ourselves and our biases. How do I put this? How do I say this? And interacting with the audience. Like I said, for me, it's important how Ethiopians also see the image, as they are my primary target groups, right? Who don't have the access or the time to travel around different parts of Ethiopia. So I just have to make sure that I am not I'm not portraying whatever has been done. So, and making sure I tell the balanced narrative. Yes, I come from the capital city, but which part of my experience in the rural area is important for the audience, that they probably are not going to change it or twist it to a different narrative.
Absolutely, thank you for that. We have a question as well from Sandra, who asks, when do you feel like a project is completely finished?
Is that for both of us, or?
I think for both of you, yeah. Do you want to start, Matt?
Yeah. No, I think Bunny has already wants to say something. Bunny?
I think that's a question that points to the importance of knowing what the story is and what you want to say. And when you have those moments that speak to that message, then it is suitable to be seen. I didn't say finished because I feel like there's no such thing as a finished project. I think there's photographers that have been doing one project for like decades, just following, always checking in. So yeah, just know what the thing you want to say. That's when it's said, that's when it's done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When can it be finished? Speaking for a documentary photography, working with communities, I think it comes to a one-time consent is not forever. As working with Fresh Story, I've been documenting for almost 2 years now, but it doesn't mean I have the right to continue documenting. Whenever I travel there, I make sure, hey, are you comfortable, So I'm still expecting, whenever they say no, whenever I feel like I want to document this for as long as I'm here, but if Sifresh and her family are no longer comfortable to share their stories, then that's it. I'm happy to finish it. Yeah. Well, I'm not happy to finish it, but I have to be happy to finish it.
You have to be set within, like, thank the universe for giving me what you did.
Right. Yeah.
Bunny, you made a point a minute ago as well about, how maybe people might think of portraits as being a bit boring, but actually how important portraits are, and how we need more, everyday portraits. And sorry, I'm looking for my question here. So I guess I was wondering, a lot of the work that you both are producing looks very different than a lot of the work that often wins like prizes, and which is often very colonialist and very problematic in many ways. And so I guess I'm wondering, how do you make the kind of work that subverts stereotypes and puts forward more accurate and more nuanced representations of Black people and Black communities and still get your work seen? Like, do you feel that there's a struggle with that, or do you feel like the tides are turning? Or could you tell me, I guess, a little bit about that?
Can you rephrase the beginning of the
Yeah.
question?
Yeah. No, it was more the idea that, I guess, for both of you, your work really works against a lot of like the dominant tropes and dominant stereotypes, and if that's a barrier to getting your work seen or not.
I think it would be more of a barrier for news, like being considered newsworth. Sometimes when I see stories about avocado toast, of which there are like so many, I'm just like, you couldn't have done a photo essay on like, it's just like what is considered newsworthy. It can be difficult to convince people of. especially, and now I'm thinking about it in terms of like, if you don't know something's a story or something's important or something's happening, you're not going to think it's newsworthy, but it's like, it's just like, what's news peg? It's just like, this thing that I'm trying to report is its own, you know? So it's hard to convince people of that. And I was just saying that those portraits, in terms of being boring, I mean that it's not an action shot. It's not like, which I can confess, you know, and that's not my strongest suit. Maybe it's a personal bias of mine. I'll admit to that. You see, checking your biases. But for me, I just think each has its different strengths, and when it comes to people who haven't been seen or haven't been seen in their truest light, you could say, I think portraits serve that function of like familiarizing us with something new. So it's like, this is a portrayal of this person. And so I usually never have people really like smiling in my photos. It's kind of just like straight to me, just like in stillness is one of my favorite ways to go about it. And it's really fun to see like what comes out of someone in those. So that's what I was talking about in that instance.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for your clarification on that point as well. We have another question here from Alison Baskerville, and she asks, how do we look for points of common human experience without whitewashing a culture or a multifaceted experience? And is it even possible to do this when we're looking at short forms of working like press photography and editorial work with deadlines?
I think when I'm photographing Black people, I am trying to capture those universal things. So, you know, just quickly, emotions or reactions. Yeah, like joy, if you're focusing, like I know someone did from the Authority Collective, one of the photographers, I had to find it. It was people, I think it's Mexican, I think, in a tent, and they're like blowing bubbles. The kids, you know, they're blowing bubbles, and it's just like such an endearing moment that cuts across. But like you said, you're on deadline. I think, yeah, just looking for those emotions. I think those things unfold pretty quickly, especially in high action moments, instead of just like, it's just like capturing that feeling. I think we'll steer away from like that colonial gaze of just like man with, I don't know, I can't even come up with an example because I don't want to trivialize it. Yeah, I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. Martha, do you have anything that you would add to that?
I think I just want to say, whenever I travel to different, to different parts of the region, I have to make sure that, no, first, hold on, I just lost my train of thought here. I wanted to say, so I only speak one of the languages in my country, and we have 80+ languages. So you can imagine different culture. Whenever I leave my city, it's different. Of course, there are similarities, but there are different cultures. So the first important thing is to understand that I am capturing an everyday life, period. I don't have to complicate it in my head saying, oh, they're different, they wear differently, they eat differently, they walk different. No, like, we connect at emotions and feelings, and that's it. So however I don't speak their language, however I don't understand the culture, but I do understand feelings and emotions because I have them. So whenever there are translators, whenever there are people interviewing as I photograph, I just make sure feelings and emotions are there. Hope, joy, and everything that we all experience as human beings.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks very much for that. Getting into maybe current events and quite relevant things for this week, especially. I know that there was some contention a couple months ago about photographer responsibility during Black Lives Matter protests, police brutality protests in the United States, especially in relation to the safety of photographed protesters in the context of police brutality. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about those issues, and maybe if you could identify what would be like the most important things that especially white photographers can do to engage more ethically and productively with those protests in a way that maybe is more reflexive or sensitive to some of those issues. Bunny, do you want to start since you're based in America?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to preface this by saying I haven't photographed the recent uprisings. But I think what the issues were, I did participate in the composing of Authority Collective's Do No Harm statement at that time. What we were trying to communicate was that there are instances in journalism when certain groups are considered protected, and we have ways about going about documenting their experience in ways that keep them protected. So example, someone's doing illegal, if you are, you want to keep someone's anonymity. If they're breaking a law, but you're like trying to document them like surviving, you don't want to bring more harm by telling this reality and getting them in trouble. You want to focus on that reality. Like there's ways to not capture that person's identity. What we were advocating was that protesters in the context of police brutality are a special consideration because the way police use images in the aftermath to find people. And that first sense of alarm went off when, you know, these protests were being captured, and destruction was the focus. And how that has since shaped the whole conversation around Black Lives Matter. When Black photographers knew that that might have been happening, but this is not what it's about. I say, like, don't give into astonishment. There's something more there. So the photos I was seeing on Instagram and the photos that were getting published in the big outlets, there was a huge discrepancy. And so that big push was to get Black photographers, but then also to have sensitivity to who is being photographed and the harms that could come. And that, you know, was pushed back with people. It's just like public and consent, but we're just asking people to be mindful of what can happen after the photograph is published, and made some suggestions as to what they can do to stay within their journalistic practice while honoring people who need protection.
Yeah, and that was a really, really, I thought, well articulated articulated statement that I definitely gained a lot from reading. I've just popped it there in the chat. So, and I'll create a list of links also after this event, and I'll share it with everybody in an email. But do check it out if you haven't had a look at it yet. Martha, do you have anything that you would add to that? Because I know you were also in the United States during some of that as well, weren't you?
Yeah, but I was staying in lockdown. No, I've learned a lot from Bunny just now. Thank you, Bunny. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Great. And I guess I was wondering, I don't know if anybody else has any other questions, but I think we're sort of winding down. So I was wondering if maybe you could give us some hope for going forward. What kinds of things do you think are changing, or do you want to see that maybe aren't changing in across the photography industry going forward to work toward better intersectional storytelling? That could be things, you know, that photo editors need to do differently, or photo institutions or other photographers. And yeah, how can we work together to make the industry more representative of the world that we live in? Martha, do you wanna start with that?
Okay, thank you, Savannah. I mean, there are different platforms that are, especially new platforms that are uplifting Black photographers, queer Black photographers from around the world, and that has personally helped me a lot into connecting, being inspired by different photographers from different parts of the world. My comment there would be, I would like to see more African-based photographers making big decisions, be it in the guidebooks, leadership positions, and different panels and conferences. Most of these conversations do happen around the US, Europe, or not around Africa, basically. So I would love to see more faces from Africa and not just in the diaspora when we say Black people. I think for editors, I mean, we've been ranting a lot, and hire Black people, hire local photographers, hire women. And I think, what else did I miss? Yeah, giving the space for queer Black people from around the globe, and acknowledging privilege, listening. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, go for it.
I think some things editors can make sure they do is hire people of color for things not related to identity, because our capabilities are vast. Also, maybe, I don't know, maybe online, I know in print there's limited space, but online, is there a way to have more room for photos in a story? I'm always confused as to why it's always limited to, 3. Not too much, maybe 6, Anyway, and these kinds of ways that people can really showcase their work, because what's happening is people are going to their social media and just sharing outtakes, and I think that's a missed opportunity for clicks. I don't know if that's a thing that people want to pay attention to. I've heard stories where it's ad driven. That could be a strategy. And I think, yeah, just for editors to fight for our stories as much as the people who are fighting to tell them are. I think that really translates when an editor really cares about the story as much as you do. That's really nice. Because if we're dealing with a lot of people that haven't had a lot of institutional support, and you might be their first instance of it. So checking in, making sure things are going well, or if they need any support, let them know that you're there for them too, as they're photographing and working for you.
I think those are all really, really important points. Thank you both so much for those thoughts going forward. Do you have anything that you'd like to share, I guess, before we close that you feel like we've not covered, or anything left to say that you feel needs said? Let me know. Otherwise, in the meantime, I'm just gonna pop the survey form in the chat, and and I also am going to pop the link for the third panel into the chat. But yeah, there's a few moments here, I guess, at the end, if either Bunny or Martha wanna add anything at the end there.
Okay, we're just asking for people to give deference to those with proximity to report from their life experiences. That's it. That's intersectional. And that applies to all people, really. I think right now is the time to look inward, to like see like, how the hell did we get here? And that's like part of it.
Absolutely. No, that's a great note to end on. Martha, do you have any nuggets of wisdom to share at the end here, or are you happy that we've covered everything you wanted to say?
Any wisdom so far? No, just playing.
Sorry?
No, I just said, are you saying I haven't shared any wisdom so far? But I'm playing. No, this was really helpful. I really enjoyed our conversation. Yeah.
Yes, you're a great host.
Oh, well, thank you both so much for being here. Thank you so much for taking the time to share these thoughts. Thank you to all the participants for being here and making space and time in your day for this conversation. I'm really, really thrilled with everything that you've both said. I think it was very educational for me. I think I've gained a lot personally from it. And I hope that everybody else has as well. So thank you very much. I will share this recording. I will share links, everything in a follow-up email. So I will close this down and let you all go. But have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.